Hello and welcome back to the spying game. Maxwell Knight, the man many consider to be Britain's greatest spymaster, was a man of intriguing contradictions. He was a passionate naturalist, fascinated by the animal world, and from a young age seemed to possess a peculiar gift for handling and bonding with animals of any species. Birds held a special allure, their songs a source of endless wonder. Yet beneath this artistic sensitivity lay a mind drawn to secrets and deception. Born in 1900, Knight's early life hinted at the complexities that would define his future. In 1914, Knight's father died. This left his mother financially dependent on Knight's uncle. Feeling his young nephew needed a profession and some discipline, Knight's uncle insists that he be sent to the HMS Worcester to undergo the grueling training for the Merchant Navy. Knight's education, though, would be interrupted by the outbreak of World War I, a conflict that would claim the life of his elder brother. Knight enlists in the Royal Naval Reserves, but does not see combat. After the war, back on shore, Knight resumed his love of pet keeping, and his London flat quickly became a veritable menagerie, filled with creatures both familiar and exotic. There was even a pet bear. Animals, though, were not Knight's only passion at this time. By now, jazz had also entered his life, and the young Maxwell Knight was becoming an obsessive, starting his own jazz band and even receiving clarinet lessons from the great Sidney Bechet. The syncopated rhythms and improvisational spirit of jazz resonated deeply with Knight. The music, with its spontaneity and complexity, mirrored the intricate dance of espionage that would later define his career. The skills he honed in understanding animal behavior and the love of improvisation he gained from jazz would become invaluable to his future espionage activities. However, not everyone in Knight's life sees value in his hobbies, and believing his nephew to be nothing more than an aimless ne'er-do-well, Knight's wealthy uncle cuts off his allowance, estranging him from the family.
The early 1920s were a time of great social and political upheaval in Britain. The horrors of World War I had left their mark, and the country was grappling with economic instability and rising unemployment. Moreover, the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 had sent shockwaves through the world, threatening to upend the established order. The success of the Bolsheviks in Russia made the possibility of a similar uprising in Britain seem all too real. This atmosphere of uncertainty provided fertile ground for extremist ideologies, including fascism. Against this backdrop, Maxwell Knight, who at this time was eking out a living as a games teacher in a school, came into the orbit of Sir George MacGill, a wealthy Scottish baronet, who during World War I was Secretary of the Anti-German Union, later renamed the British Empire Union. MacGill, deeply conservative and patriotic, believed Britain faced an existential threat from left-wing radicals. Knight, perhaps trying to find a direction for his life and a father figure, found himself drawn to MacGill. He accepted MacGill's offer to go to work for him as a spy, but the organization Knight was being asked to infiltrate was not a left-wing group, but rather a group that held beliefs very similar to MacGill's own. This group was ultra-nationalist, fiercely pro-monarchy, and rabidly anti-communist, and its name was the British Fascisti, or the British Fascists. Knight's job was to join the British Fascists and keep MacGill informed of its undertakings. This was a role Knight excelled at. MacGill had done well in recognizing the young man's potential for a life less ordinary, and Knight took to subterfuge like a duck to water, quickly rising through the ranks of the British Fascists. With his affable personality and innate understanding of the human animal, Knight quickly found himself becoming an influential voice within the British Fascists, an organization that looked to Mussolini's Italy as its model, embracing the symbols and rituals that defined the fascist movement. Their rhetoric was filled with calls for national unity and the elimination of perceived enemies within the state. They sought to create a homogeneous society, free from dissent and diversity. Gradually, Knight found himself part of the BF's paramilitary wing, the K organization. This group was tasked with carrying out the more unsavory aspects of the BF's mission, including acts of violence and intimidation. Knight's exploits with the K organization were a far cry away from his future approach of subtlety and infiltration. It was while in the K organization that Knight would meet William Joyce, a fiery orator with a gift for rabble-rousing. Joyce, a charismatic speaker, could whip crowds into a frenzy with his denunciations of communism. Knight may have been with Joyce at the incident that would leave his friend scarred for life. A violent brawl broke out between the British fascists and their opponents during a political rally at Lambeth Baths Hall in the run-up to a general election. On that day in 1924, as he struggled to defend himself, a razor blade slashed across Joyce's face, leaving a permanent scar. Joyce would later flee to Germany at the start of World War II and become more widely known as Lord Haw-Haw. The Lambeth Baths incident was more than just a brawl. It was a microcosm of the growing social and political tensions in post-World War I Britain. The country was grappling with economic hardship, social change, and the rise of extremist movements on both the left and the right.
The spectre of communism loomed large over British society in the 1920s. The fear was not just a passing concern, but a deep-seated anxiety that gripped the nation. In Britain, among the establishment, the fear of a communist uprising was palpable. The working class, already struggling with unemployment and poor living conditions, seemed ripe for radicalization, and the ruling elite viewed the burgeoning Labour Party as a Trojan horse for Bolshevism. To them, the Labour Party's calls for workers' rights and social reforms were thinly veiled attempts to introduce communist ideologies. The general strike of 1926 seemed to confirm their worst fears. The country was brought to a standstill as workers from various industries walked out in solidarity with the striking miners. For the ruling class, it seemed the moment they had all been fearing since the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 had finally arrived on Britain's shores. But the revolution did not occur. There was no workers' uprising and no dictatorship of the proletariat. Instead, the government won, and after 9 days, the miners, seemingly betrayed by the TUC, went back to work without achieving their demands. After the general strike of 1926, some of the momentum fell out of the fascist movement. It seemed the threat of communism was not as great as they had feared. With the country's established order seemingly secure, leaving the world of fascism behind, Knight got married and relocated from London to the country to settle down and run a pub with his wife. Everything changed, though, in June 1929, when the Labour Party won a general election and Ramsay MacDonald became Prime Minister of the UK. For the fascists who had gone to ground after the general strike, this was a sign that communism, now more than ever, was still a threat. And so it was around this time that Knight was approached by a disciple of his now deceased mentor, George McGill, and asked if he'd be willing to go back into the spy game, to use his gift for handling people to recruit agents to infiltrate left-wing groups, with particular focus on the Communist Party of Great Britain. Currently stuck in an unfulfilling marriage, Knight accepted the offer and, leaving his wife Gladys to run their country pub alone, moved back to London. However, Knight's work as a freelance spymaster soon came to the attention of MI5, Britain's domestic security service established in 1909. Strangely, though, instead of shutting down the operation of this self-taught spymaster, they offered him a job, a chance to carry on as he was, only now in an official capacity. Knight seized the opportunity, and for his new role as an official government spymaster, he adopted the moniker M, a code name also used by MI5's very first chief, William Melville. In the 1950s, for his debut novel Casino Royale, Ian Fleming, a friend of Knight's, would also use the name M for the head of James Bond's 00 section. But let's not go off on a tangent, because I can talk James Bond all day. Under the aegis of MI5, Knight and his new M organization would break convention by recruiting female operatives, and through the endeavors of the mysterious Miss X, uncover the biggest spy ring ever on British soil. That, though, is a story for another time. If you found this introduction to one of Britain's most famous spymasters intriguing, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more spy stories. Until next time, keep your secrets safe.